Today I'd like to talk about a game that we've all played at one time or another in our lives. It's called the blame game. We learn it at a very young age, and it's a sense of comfort to us throughout most of our lives. I'll give you an example. Back in high school, I had a geography teacher, Mr. Phillips. Hated him. Hated geography. And the fact that he was not a very good teacher, not very conscientious, didn't pay attention to his students very much, I used that to avoid taking responsibility. Now, we learned the rules of this game very early on as well. Basically, you do everything within your power to avoid, for as long as possible, taking responsibility for your own actions, your own problems, your own shortcomings. Sounding familiar? Sounding like something you've done? Back to Mr. Phillips. As I said, I hated geography. Hated clouds, hated locations on a map, hated having to plot locations on a map. Didn't like any of it. So when I brought my report card home and showed it to my mother, and she saw all of these C's and B's in other classes and this one D in geography, I had my story ready. Look, he hates us, probably doesn't even like children very much, and he's a terrible teacher. I tried my hardest, but he just can't teach us geography. And I quoted some statistics that helped my case. You see, no one really did well in his class. As I said, he was a terrible teacher. And because that worked, I realized that I could get away with things that I didn't like as long as I was able to place the blame on someone else. You see, whether he was a terrible teacher or not was immaterial. I had the textbooks at my disposal. I could have studied on my own, but I didn't. And because he was an easy scapegoat, I got away with it. Children learn how to take advantage of the blame game. And these children grow into adults who know how to take advantage of the blame game. And this is a problem that is far-reaching. It's the world over. Any group of people anywhere on earth knows how to play the blame game. Don't believe me? Feminists blame all their problems on the patriarchy. Black people still blame whites. Every group in society knows how to place the blame on someone else. Let's bring it back home. Some of you are old enough to remember something called Norman's Key. It's in the Exumas. Now, Norman's Key was a transshipment point between Colombia and the US. It's where transshipment planes carrying lots of coke would stop, refuel, take off again for destinations further north. Norman's Key wasn't stolen. It was sold to a quite notorious drug trafficker. There's a video on YouTube, I'll post a link to it here if I can, of our late former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Lyndon Oscar Pindling. He's giving an interview to a US news service. Very impassioned, very fiery, very rah, 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 defending the Bahamas, placing the blame on the US. If Americans didn't have such an insatiable appetite for cocaine, there would be no point in using the Bahamas as a transshipment point. And he was right. All the points he made were spot on. But that doesn't mean that we held no culpability in the matter. Because as I said earlier, they didn't steal the island. We sold it to them. We sold it to them knowing full well what it's being used for. Our conscience, our conscience was soothed because we could place the blame on someone else. That type of attitude, that type of spirit, still rests within our country. They called us the nation for sale. Has a lot changed? We sell our children's future, to be able to pay for a $12 million party today. We almost sold our fishing rights to a foreign power. And when confronted with these realities, what do we say? Whatever comes to mind. Anything to avoid taking responsibility for what we have done. We're good at the blame game. And it permeates every facet of society. How often have you heard women say, "Ain't no good man around"? Well, madam, you have 5 children with 4 different guys. Obviously, your choice of men has not been the best. Has your standard suddenly risen? Take some responsibility. Maybe ain't no good man around because they don't need to be. Parents complain about the D average in schools. So it's the school's fault? Ladies and gentlemen, it is not the government's responsibility to educate your children. That's your responsibility. If your kids ain't meeting the mark, maybe you should take a greater interest in their education. Just a thought. And the absolute best one. These politicians so corrupt, man. Wait, didn't you vote for them? If you didn't vote for them, you know someone who did. And come to think of it, a few years ago, when your guys who were in power were doing the exact same thing, you defended them. What's good for the goose is not good for the gander? I said all that to say this. The blame game is a child's game. It's what immature people use to avoid taking responsibility. I've done it. You've done it. Maybe we should all collectively stop doing it. Let's put away childish things. Let's accept responsibility. Maybe then we can actually start to do something to change it for the better. As always, feel free to disagree, but here endeth the lesson.
Bahamas does not grow drugs. Americans buy it from where it came from. Americans are engaged in transporting it. Americans receive it in the United States. Americans use it in the United States. My little country stretches 500-600 miles from Florida to Haiti or Cuba. In order for our tourism to grow, we've got airstrips right on through those islands. We've got about 25 or 26 government on airstrips.
Is it possible that Mr. Vesco is using your...
Just hold on, ma'am. Just hold on. And there are some private ones. And the FBI, the DEA, and any other kind of A you have can't stop them coming into airfields in Florida. You expect my little country, me, with 200-odd thousand